Shut up and sit down.
My name is Mathieu Deflem. I'm a professor of sociology at the University of South Carolina. My primary interest in research and teaching are sociology of law, social control, criminal justice issues, and I also teach sociological theory. Secondarily, my research area is popular culture, particularly fame, celebrity. I'm recently actually doing research on cinema. I initially began during my dissertation phase, obviously my PhD at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I decided to do an historical study on international police cooperation. And the key issue was that globalization was a new phenomenon. So we think about globalization in terms of technology, you know, that it becomes possible to easily travel from one part of the world to another. It becomes possible to communicate easily through, internet, emails, and so on and so forth. So the world is getting smaller these days. And I had the following very, very simple idea. I told myself, this cannot all be new. So, and that's what I did. I did a study of the history of international police cooperation, both in Europe and in the United States, from about the early 19th century until World War II. I would say there were particularly two issues. The first one was how far back international police cooperation went, even on an organized level. And the first international police, like a real organization, a permanent international police organization, existed from 1851 until 1860s. So I would say how far back it goes was the most surprising finding. The second one is that the origins of what we call a criminal international police cooperation, so you have police cooperation to track down suspects that have committed criminal offenses, actually has political origins. So the first international police organizations were not set up to track down criminals, thieves, people who trade in prostitutes, sex traders, that is a very old thing as well, those kind of crimes, but to track down political opponents, to track down people who were Democrats. Very interesting. I received the last comment on my book in August of 2001, and one of the comments was it would be useful in the conclusion to say something contemporary. And so a couple of months later, the very last section of my book is called September 11. The relevance of my work was dictated by these tragic events in society itself. And one of the issues that is actually one of the issues that became very relevant and that is still relevant until this very day, is how to police terrorism. What is terrorism? Is terrorism a crime? Isn't terrorism always political? Isn't one person terrorist, another person's freedom fighter? And all these, normative moral questions that we ask, they all can be addressed from the viewpoint of my work. At the time when I had been a professional sociologist for about 15, maybe going on 20 years, I decided to study something else. And that was the only reason that I started studying pop culture. And I then made the now infamous decision to decide to organize a course in Sociology of Fame that focused on the career of Lady Gaga. And this was now about 9 years ago, so now obviously a household name. But at the time, Lady Gaga was the talk of the world, not just the talk of the town, every day from about 2009 until 2011. And it was a very interesting issue for a number of reasons. Obviously, I'm a pop music fan. I've been a music fan since I was, a child, and I was interested in music, but I was also interested in the growing relevance of what we nowadays call celebrity culture. The entire obsession, stretching to Kylie Jenner and all that stuff. And Lady Gaga was kind of part of this new wave of young women in pop music, and that had taken the world by storm, so to speak, and that were deliberately seeking to be famous, which in the case of popular music is very interesting, because the story of popular music, particularly of the music industry, from the 90s until today is a story of decline. There's no CDs anymore, all the record companies have collapsed, they all had to adjust, so the entire technological infrastructure and the economic infrastructure of popular music was on the decline, and that was right at the time when the career of Lady Gaga was rising. And so that was actually the question, how come Lady Gaga has become so world famous at a time when everybody's saying, well, popular music is dead. And what I found, and I thought one of the most central findings would be that Lady Gaga was part of the new generation of pop stars who took advantage of the internet. And that is true, because the internet was the enemy of pop music industry. They tried to sue everybody. They pulled down Napster, those early companies. So the music industry always saw the internet as the enemy of pop music, and Lady Gaga and her manager and her team saw the new technologies as something a new means that they could communicate with to this new and growing audience. And she actually had that in common with Justin Bieber. So Lady Gaga was one of the first pop stars to connect with her fans outside of the mainstream media by using technology, by using like we're doing now, by using her, making her own videos, putting her videos on YouTube, and directly going to her fans. To some extent, it's like making music. If you ask an artist, why do you make music? They will say, well, for the music. The relevance of the music is in the music, and the relevance of gathering knowledge is in the gathering of the knowledge. Now, having said that, there is a second part to the story, fortunately. So sociology is not useless. That is also true. And so let's say there would at least be two dimensions to it. One would be personal. I think it is better to have sociological knowledge than to not have it, because unavoidably, no matter what you do, you live in a society. You cannot get it. Sociology is unavoidable. It will make you a better citizen. I think sociology will make you a better citizen because it will teach you not to take as we nowadays say, to take narratives at face value. There are things that people say about social issues that are flat out wrong, and a sociologist can tell you that. They cannot often tell you which the right answers are, but they can definitely very often tell you which the wrong answers are. And so in that sense, it contributes to your citizenship, which I think is very important. The role of education in terms of citizenship. And only the third part of the answer would be, maybe it can help you in your job, whatever your job may be.